What are the best and worst chest exercises for muscle growth? Well, for a chest movement to rank highly, it needs to tick 3 boxes. 1, a big stretch with high tension. If it doesn't offer high tension in a deep stretch, I'm putting it in F tier, no exceptions. 2, it needs to feel good. It shouldn't cause pain, and it should have a smooth resistance profile. Giving a good pump and a nice mind-muscle connection would be nice too. 3, it needs to have a simple progression. If you can't progressively overload by adding weight or reps, that's not good. And after ranking 20 of the most popular movements from S for super to F for fail, at the end, I'll crown one exercise as the best of the chest, raising it to S tier plus, and one as the most inept for the pecs, sending it to F tier hell. All right, let's get the worst out of the way. The hex press. I'm not a big fan of these. First, you never get a big stretch in your pecs because your arms never stretch out. They stay tucked in the whole time. And they don't offer maximum tension because your triceps will take over. There's no evidence that these target the inner pecs. In fact, I think they'd probably be worse for the inner pecs than a standard dumbbell press since the inner pec fibers aren't getting as stretched here. The hex press is going in F tier. The plate press is basically a hex press that feels even more awkward with even less overload potential, so it's also going in F tier. The dumbbell pullover is a tricky one. Biomechanics tells us that the pecs do help perform this movement alongside the lats and triceps. And when you look at the activation data, the pecs do activate on pullovers. The problem is, I simply don't feel my pecs when I do this movement whatsoever, and more or less every client I've ever worked with says the same. And I don't see many top bodybuilders putting these on their chest day. So despite some theoretical merit, I think pullovers are a much better lat exercise than a pec exercise, and for that reason, I'm gonna put them in D tier. All right, let's look at some better exercises. The bench press. My ranking might surprise you here. It offers high tension on the pecs as long as you bring the bar all the way down to your chest. It's very easy to overload, and you can always add some weight over time as you get stronger. It feels good to me, although many people do complain that the bench press makes their shoulders feel a little cranky. I suspect that's because they're trying to lift more weight than they should be lifting, but I still hear the issue commonly enough that I do count it as a slight negative. So if it were just me, I think I'd probably put the bench press in S tier. I credit most of my own pec development to this exercise. However, it is true that the barbell won't allow the pecs to get in quite as deep of a stretch as dumbbells do, since it'll come up solid against your rib cage, and based on my coaching experience, not everyone gets as much pec activation out of the bench press as I do. So for that reason, I'm gonna hesitantly drop it back to A tier. The incline bench press has all the same upsides as the flat bench press, except it slightly emphasizes the upper pecs. Now, a lot of people think this means it isn't as good for the mid and lower pecs as the flat bench. However, a recent study found that the incline bench press caused the same lower and mid pec growth as the flat bench did, plus better upper pec growth. So it's very close to S tier, but I think I'm gonna leave it in A tier as well. The decline bench press doesn't have any long-term research comparing pec growth like the incline and flat bench. However, biomechanics tells us that a decline angle should target the mid and lower pecs a bit more. However, it has 2 minor downsides. For one, in my experience, more people struggle with getting their upper pecs to grow than their mid to lower pecs, so if you're trying to shift the bias, I would shift it toward the upper pecs for most people. Second, the decline bench does have slightly less range of motion than both the flat and the incline press. So out of the 3 angle options, I would say it's my least favorite. I know some people swear by it, and it clearly is an effective chest builder. It's very close to being in A tier, but I'm gonna put it in B tier. All right, the flat dumbbell press. This offers a deeper stretch on the pecs than the barbell because the dumbbells can move freely past the rib cage. They feel great, you should get a great chest pump on these, and because people are less likely to let their ego take over on this exercise, it's less common for people to have shoulder issues. As a beginner and intermediate level lifter, you should be able to progressively overload this movement just fine by either adding reps or increasing the weight of the dumbbells. However, once you get decently strong, you may max out the dumbbell rack at your gym, which usually stops at 100 pounds. Also, once you get that strong, the dumbbells get so big and bulky that they can be quite awkward to handle. So while the flat dumbbell press is just about in S tier, it's getting knocked down to A tier for those potential overloading issues in more advanced lifters. The incline dumbbell press is also going in A tier, since it's the same basic movement with the same upsides and downside, except again, it has slightly more emphasis on the upper pecs. And I'm putting the decline dumbbell press in B tier, since I do find it awkward to set up. You'll probably need someone to hand you the dumbbells, and again, lower pecs rarely need any extra emphasis. Okay, the machine chest press. A good chest press machine will give a nice deep stretch on the pecs and provide high tension throughout the range of motion. Unlike barbells and dumbbells, you're more locked in, which should help increase the mind-muscle connection with your pecs and give a massive pump. Machines are very easy to overload. You can always add some weight or a rep from week to week, and they have the advantage of being a little safer to push to failure than free weights. Assuming you have a good chest press machine that ticks all those boxes, I really can't think of a downside from a muscle building standpoint. And so the machine chest press is our first exercise, getting awarded to S tier. All right, dips. Let's see. Massive stretch on the pecs, possibly the best compound exercise I'm aware of for getting into a deep pec stretch. They offer high tension, and there's many ways to apply progressive overload. You can do assisted dips and reduce the assistance weight over time, or you can do body weight dips and add reps, or you can slow down the negative a bit more from week to week. And then as you gain more strength, you can use a weight belt to add external load. The only downside of dips is that some people find that their shoulders get cranky if they do them too much, although I've never actually experienced that personally. But I will say, I don't think dips have the smoothest feel. So despite many upsides, they are taking a slight hit in the feels good department for me, and for that reason, I'm gonna put them in A tier instead of S tier. They're definitely an exercise worth including though. Okay, what about push-ups? Bodyweight push-ups are nice because you can do them anywhere without any equipment. However, assuming you do have gym access, I think there are far better options for chest growth. The problem is that once you get decently strong, you'll need to do at least 30 plus reps to get close enough to failure to maximize muscle growth, which isn't ideal. I do think that's fine if you're doing them as a end of workout finisher, but otherwise doing all those reps can be exhausting for no added benefit. You'll also come up solid against the floor before your pecs are fully stretched, and they're not that easy to overload. While you can have a partner add some weight to your back, the weight always feels a bit unstable for me. They are a decent beginner exercise, but I'm still putting bodyweight push-ups in C tier. Banded push-ups do add some extra tension to the movement. However, almost all of that tension is added to the top half rather than the bottom half of the push-up. So tension still isn't being maximized while the pecs are stretched. I still think they're a decent finisher though, so I'll put them in B tier. Deficit push-ups fix the problem of not getting a deep stretch on the pecs, and even though they're still a bit tricky to overload, you can make the exercise more challenging by pausing for 2 to 3 seconds in the bottom. I think that if you're gonna do push-ups, this is how you should do them. Deficit push-ups are going in A tier. I used to do a lot of plyometric push-ups in my early powerlifting days to build up explosive chest power for the bench press, but I've fallen out of love with them since. They're just not great for maximizing tension on the negative or in the stretch, and even though there is some research supporting more explosive training, I'd rather use an explosive tempo on a weight-loaded exercise like the bench press if bodybuilding is the goal. I'm gonna put these in D tier as a chest builder. Speaking of less conventional exercises, the guillotine press is basically a normal flat bench press, except you shrug your shoulders up, flare your elbows out, and lower the barbell down to your neck. A lot of people kick up a big fuss about this exercise causing shoulder issues, but there's no direct evidence or even strong rationale to support that. You can listen to Dr. Mike if you don't believe me.
Some people will bench press guillotine style, where they take a higher position on the chest and they let their elbows come up. They feel a huge stretch in the pecs. Their shoulders feel amazing. No problem. Correct answer. Other folks will touch a little bit below the nipple line, actually on their abdomen, and they will tuck their elbows on the way down. If that is what hits your pecs the most, and it makes your elbows and shoulders feel nice and comfy and safe, beautiful, right answer. What I don't want you guys to get caught up in is people on the internet who say this is bad because biomechanics. I don't know where the fuck they say that, because if you go out here, notice my pecs are getting more stretched as I pull out.
That said, I do believe that for some people, especially those with pre-existing shoulder issues, flaring the elbows might hurt. So in that case, I just wouldn't bother with these. However, guillotine presses will stretch the pecs better than any of the other barbell presses we've discussed, and it also has a cool history in lifting culture. I am a fan, and I would put it in A tier. However, because it's potentially very dangerous, dropping the bar on your neck would be lights out, I'm gonna go ahead and put it in F tier. I just don't think the potential hazard risk is worth any potential marginal gains you'll get from it. That said, if you modify the exercise to do the same basic movement with dumbbells, it suddenly becomes much safer, and in that case, I am gonna put these in A tier. Again, these may fall in D tier or F tier for those of you who get shoulder pain from it, but in my experience, the majority of lifters can flare their elbows without issue. Just start light and build up your tolerance. To round out the dumbbell press variations, I guess I'll cover the one-arm dumbbell press. I still see this quite a bit at the gym, but doing one arm at a time has no advantage because each pec has to work individually in a dumbbell press anyway. So doing them one arm at a time just makes it harder to keep your balance, which disperses tension away from the pecs. Maybe a bit harsh, but I'm gonna put these in F tier. The Smith machine gets a lot of hate for some reason, but studies consistently show that it is effective at building muscle across a variety of different exercises. I think it's a great alternative to the standard bench press with all the same upsides, plus I find I'm more confident pushing the Smith machine press closer to failure. These are going in A tier along with the other barbell presses. And the incline Smith machine press is the same basic movement, except with a little more upper pec emphasis, so they're also going in A tier. Okay, so far we've been discussing only compound chest exercises. Presses, dips, and push-up variations that'll smash the pecs, but also target the front delts and triceps. Sometimes you want to isolate the pecs, and for that, we've got a bunch of pec fly variations. There's cable crossovers, seated cable pec flies, the pec deck machine, and dumbbell flies. Let's start with cable crossovers. These do provide a big stretch on the pecs with nice, smooth, and even tension throughout the range of motion. They feel good to me and usually give me a solid chest pump. They're not quite as conducive to progressive overload as pressing movements simply because you can't go as heavy, but you can still add a rep here and there and focus on technique, so that's not a deal breaker. The only downside to these is that by doing them standing, you may find that the cable pulls your body back, especially as you get stronger, which can make it less stable. You can correct for this by bending forward and flying downward, so while it's close to being perfect, it's not the most stable fly variation, and for that reason, I'm putting it in A tier. The seated pec fly has all the same upsides as the cable crossover, but by sitting down, you get rid of the balancing component and increase the stability of the exercise, which will make sure that all the tension coming from the cables is being applied directly to the pecs. This is my favorite chest isolation movement at the moment, and so I'm going to make it my second addition to S tier. The pec deck machine shares many of the same benefits as you're also seated, so it's nice and stable, and you'll be able to get a big stretch on your pecs with high tension. I just don't find it feels quite as good as the cables do. The machine locks you into a very specific movement path, whereas the cables allow your shoulder to move a bit more freely. This means you may not be able to find that perfect line of pull for your pecs specifically. This is a pretty subjective one, but I'm gonna put the pec deck machine in A tier. All right, the dumbbell fly. Now, a couple years ago, I probably would have put this one in C tier because you get literally zero tension at the top of the range of motion when the pecs are most contracted. However, recent evidence has shown that the contraction is most likely not as important as the stretch is for muscle growth, and so I've opened the dumbbell fly back up as a viable option. I like to do these all as lengthened partials, so I just cut out the top half of the movement altogether where there's no tension anyway. But I still don't think they're quite as smooth as cable flies, and so they're losing 1 point in the feels good department. I'm putting dumbbell flies in A tier. Okay, let's finish off with 3 less common exercises. One that I hate, one that I love, and one that's just okay. The cable press around is probably the only exercise we've covered so far that gets the pec fully contracted. That's because the press around is a rare exercise where you press the cable across your midline. So I do like to include it periodically for this reason, because even though the stretch literature is convincing to me, I still think including some short-length biased work isn't a bad idea until we get more evidence. Some people do find the movement to be a bit awkward at first, but once you get the hang of it, it really is a great option. I love the press around, and it's going in A tier. The crossbody standing dumbbell fly is another exercise where you extend your arm across your body to get the upper pecs fully contracted. But unlike the cable press around, the dumbbell offers literally zero tension when the pec is stretched. This is also basically a front raise, meaning the front delts will steal a lot of the tension from the pecs, even if you squeeze them at the top. Doing dumbbell flies lying down makes a lot more sense biomechanically, and so these are going in F tier. The floor press is mainly used for developing maximum bench press strength, and it's an exercise that I include in a lot of my strength and power building programs, as I think it's great for smashing the triceps and improving lockout strength. That said, the limited range of motion makes it a less than ideal candidate for chest hypertrophy, as you never get the pecs fully stretched. So even though I do love it for strength, it's just okay for pec growth, and I'm gonna leave it in C tier. Now, if I had to crown just one exercise as the best of the best, I'd probably go with a machine chest press. This is a broad category, and some machines are certainly better than others, but if you can find one that feels good at your gym, I definitely think it's worth including. It ticks all the regular boxes, and you can safely push it to failure. And if I had to pick one exercise as the worst of the worst, it'd probably be the plate press. This is just one of those exercises that influencers do to be different, but unfortunately, it comes with a ton of downsides, and no real upside. Also, I just launched phase 2 of my Pure Bodybuilding program over on jeffnippert.com, so that's available for pre-order right now. Phase 1 of the program got the highest praise I've ever received from a whole bunch of experts in the field, and I've got a long list of amazing testimonials from people who ran the program. Phase 2 builds on that by introducing more than 90 new exercises and plenty new intensity techniques, many of which I've never shown here on the channel before. If you pre-order, you'll get all 3 versions of the program for the price of one. So you'll get the push-pull legs, upper lower, and full body versions of the program, which is more than 6 months of training in total. And the pre-order lasts for 1 week. If you didn't run phase 1 yet, I would recommend starting with that one first, and just for this week only, I'm also gonna knock phase 1 off by 30%. So now might be a good time to pick up both, as this is the most discounted they'll ever be. So I'll put a link to the new program over here next to my head if you wanna check it out, and there'll also be links to both phases in the description box down below as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys all here in the next one.